It is 5 o'clock, so I'm going to call the May 12th meeting of the Sherwood Planning Commission to order. The Secretary will call the roll.
Bruno?
Here.
Gillum?
Here.
Knight? Martin? Middleton?
Here. First item is you have received a copy of the March 10th minutes of the commission. Do you have any corrections or additions?
Motion to approve.
Picture that PIN number. Yeah, that's the number we signed.
She should already have you signed on. You're on, dude.
Okay.
Yeah, yes. I seen you.
Oh, there's Martin. Okay. Do we have a second on that?
Yes.
Who was the second?
Motion.
Second.
Okay, are you ready for number 5?
No, we have to take a vote.
Okay, I'm sorry.
You have to take a vote on the minutes.
Okay. Okay. Bruno?
Aye.
Gillum?
Here.
Martin?
Aye.
Middleton?
Aye. I think there is one additional item to the agenda. Richard, is there a final plat for us to look at?
Yes, sir. We have Bear Paw 3 that has come to us, requested for final plat approval. There are some items that are incomplete, but there are many that are complete. We have a checklist, water, sewer, those are utilities are done. Specifically, the roadway is not complete, but that's because of weather-related conditions. And the contractor believes that they can finish it in a matter of days and would prefer to have pre-approval
Richard,
on the final plat so that, you know, we can do that. So that,
Richard,
yes, sir.
we'll take that up under new business.
Okay. There is one other item.
Okay.
I'd like to introduce our planner. City of Sherwood has hired a staff planner, Ms. Shannon Meinhold. She's here in the room with us. Shannon is a degreed planner from University of Illinois, has years of experience, lived close by, is acquainted with Sherwood, and very glad to have you on board.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Really glad to have you here, Shannon.
And Mr. Middleton, there's one more thing.
Yes.
I don't have the PDF in front of me, but there is a very nice award, very pretty, very attractive. It's presented from the Sherwood Chamber of Commerce for the Man of the Year. Happens to be Mr. Rob Middleton. And hey, I should say that one of the strong reasons for that Man of the Year award is his dedication to the Planning Commission and his exemplary leadership on being ahead, leading us, helping us, and doing much more than I would have ever expected from a Planning Commission chair because of his unique experience, lifelong experience in planning. So, Mr. Middleton, you mean a lot to us, and we're very happy that you received the award.
Well, thank you. I was completely surprised and honored.
Sherwood Chamber was honored to give it to you.
Well, with that, the agenda stands as called. Secretary will read item number 5.
Amend the land use plan in the vicinity to the southeast of the intersection of Lantrip Road and Hollywood Avenue.
Mr. Gambrell.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Your packets, you should have received a land use amendment, Planning Commission staff report. This is a project where it had come in for a zoning request change, but oftentimes when a zoning change comes in for a rather small parcel, in some instances it necessitates an examination of the land use policy map for not only that parcel, but perhaps some land surrounding it. And so that's essentially what we have here. So the city of Sherwood is considering amending the land use map from office buffer area to commercial corridor for two parcels. The parcel that had come in for rezoning at a little over 1/2 an acre, and then a portion of surrounding parcel at 2.55 acres. So give or take around 3 acres total. And again, this is not the zoning map necessarily, but we're discussing the policy map, the land use plan. In your reports, and I will not read it verbatim, but in the screen in front of you, you should see the existing conditions. The subject properties are unimproved. They are existing lots of record. They are located along the 1000 block of Lantrip Road. There are no addresses right now assigned. Both parcels are recessed slightly eastward from the intersection with Hollywood Avenue, and they do derive legal access to the public right of way through a 20-foot 5-foot wide by 100-foot long easement, which does stem from Lantrip Road. So there is legal access right now to the land in question. Right now, the city is requesting a change in land use policy, again, from office buffer area to commercial corridor. And I will not necessarily read from the summary from our PRC items, but this has been discussed quite a bit, including this morning's PRC. Please advise if the graphic that I'm presenting isn't shown in its entirety, but this is a sort of a quasi-regional view of the subject properties in relation to Highway 67, 167. You can see in light blue, there are two parcels, the 1/2 acre smaller piece and the 2.5 acre larger piece. Both have a pink color fill. That is the office buffer area land use classification. And the city recommendation is to change that to that red color that's immediately south, which would be a commercial corridor. And we'll go ahead and have a zoom in graphic here in a moment. This one is very much the last graphic you saw. This one has the zoning as well. So you can see that the hatched lines in black, those are the subject parcels to be changed. And you can see that the smaller parcel has a C3 zoning classification, and the R1 zoning class is rather large and encompasses most of this office buffer area, but does extend down into this area. And the zoning isn't being requested to be changed for the majority of this. This is simply a policy map.
Okay, the backstory on this is that the commission at the March meeting approved or recommended approval to the city council to rezone that little parcel from C3 to C4. That was based on our understanding of what the land use plan was showing in that area. That was incorrect, so I requested that it be pulled from the council's agenda because we were making a decision on the proposed zoning based on what we thought the land use plan was showing. So the question, the reason this is coming up for a public hearing for our consideration is that we need to revise the land use plan in order to support rezoning if that's what you choose to do. So with that, have we received any comments in writing prior to the meeting? Staff?
There are no comments for this case.
Okay, I'm going to open a public hearing. Does anybody wish to speak to this? I'll wait longer than usual just because of the time delay in the video. But hearing none, I'll close the public hearing. Commission, does staff wish to make any other comments?
I think it fits right along with the C4 right in there. getting some new.
Is there any other comments?
As a change to the land use, it seems consistent
Right,
using that north boundary of the crosshatch there. It cleans it up along that line, the projection of Hollywood Drive across there. So it's going to be, I think, very helpful in the future, even though we're only, the next item is only one small piece of that.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to push it on to the council meeting.
Well, actually, we can approve a change in the plan and recommend that the council change it by resolution.
Okay, and I'll just make the motion therefore with that.
Second.
Was that Lucian? I'm sorry.
Second.
Bruno,
Aye.
Gillum,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Middleton.
Aye. Okay, next item on the agenda.
Zoning amendment to parcel number 23S05300000900 off Lantrip Road from C3 to C4, Thomas Engineering Agent.
All right, well, this report, commission should have received this as well. Same general area. This is the specific zoning request that precipitated the larger land use discussion. The request for the 0.5 acre parcel is from C3 to C4. We've talked about the site and its size during our PRCs. We've talked about it's limited to 35% lot coverage and the setbacks, and limited to approximately 7,600 square foot building envelope. That's an approximate based on the survey that was submitted to staff. Those parameters really wouldn't change, whether we are talking about a land use policy or not. Going from C3 to C4 wouldn't change what their bulk and area and their coverages would be. However, we are looking at it with respect to whether it conforms, if you will, to the current land use policy, which before the council adopts it, it technically does not. But here's a Google Street View of the site. You can kind of see it tucked back here. This is a perspective from the intersection of Hollywood and Lantrip, kind of looking in a southeasterly direction. And here's the boundary survey for the property in question. Similar graphic, just showing the individual property that's requesting to go from C3 to C4, showing that office buffer that we believe it should change to commercial corridor, which would be red. Again, very similar graphic, just highlighting the individual parcel. And then once again, the individual parcel with the close-up with its zoning shown in relation to the adopted land use plan. Your report essentially recommends supporting the zoning change from C3 to C4.
Candy, did you submit a separate public notice for this? A second one?
A second notice?
Yeah,
Yes.
okay. Then I'm going to call the public hearing open. Were there any written comments?
No, not on this case, Mr. Middleton.
Does anybody wish to address it or speak to it? I'll call the public hearing closed. Commissioners, basically, we approved it once.
Right. Was that the hydraulics place?
Yes.
Yeah. I'll make a motion to approve it again.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Bruno,
Aye.
Gillum,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Middleton,
Aye. Next item.
amend the land use plan in the vicinity to the north of Warden Road along Bowling World Road.
Mr. Gambrill.
Yes, sir. In your packets, there's one report for this property because of the nature of the request and some of the history that you'll find in your PRC comments. I have decided to concatenate or combine items. Let's see, we're dealing with Warden Road, excuse me, number 7 and number 8 together in one report, because toward the end of this report, you will read in the analysis that we're sort of combining both the land use issue and then, of course, the zoning matter that actually came before staff. And not unlike the others, when a zoning application comes in, staff will make a point to take a look at our land use policy, because oftentimes the applicants aren't as aware of the land use policy. But of course, in our current planning environment, the city is very keen on reviewing that land use policy with respect to any possible zoning changes. So that's essentially what we have. This property is roughly 4.82 acres for one parcel and roughly 2.07 acres for the other parcel. And it's fairly heavily wooded. It is off Warden Road. You can see in the graphic on your screen, the top image actually shows the access, that it's a paper road. It's actually Bowling World Drive, but it's a paper street, and it was never improved further in as one looks in a westward or northwestern direction. The graphic on the south side of this is just for references. If you were to go into the Bearing Cross Church driveway and you were to extend off to the left, you would reach the north side of this property, which again is pretty heavily wooded. Here's the survey that was initially submitted by the applicant months ago. And at some point, the applicant or some prior ownership was under the impression that they had already had a high density zoning classification or R3, which they did not. The existing zoning right now is C3 for this property. Apparently this had some history prior to my consulting services with the city, where they had requested a higher density residential before, and that request was denied. Here's the subject property, roughly 6.9 acres, and you can see that in relation to that Bowling World Drive. It's what we call a paper street. Right now, it's literally an access drive for this office use here, but that's how the legal access and then ultimately physical access would be provided. And you can see that this site, it is zoned. Actually, it is zone C4, excuse me. The applicant had incorrectly assumed that it was C3. It actually is C4 now, excuse me. But it is still 6.9 acres. It's rather unique site in relation to the city, as it's one of the last vacant high intensity commercial uses left to be developed. So along with the request for rezoning, this is the site plan that was submitted to staff. As you can see, there are technically two building envelopes, even though this is multifamily. So there'd be a sort of a circular building with an open space in the middle and a pool, and then a somewhat smaller building detached off to the south, but still on the same property. And this is a graphic that shows that same site plan in relation to the zoning map. It's a little transparent, may be difficult to see, but you can see through it a little bit just so you can get an idea of the ingress and egress point from Bowling World Drive and how those building envelopes would present themselves in relation to some of the surrounding improvements. Here's the building information. Again, this was submitted by the applicant. You're dealing with roughly 6.9 acres again. You see that you have 26 units per gross acre. There's a breakdown of the building information in front of you. And they say it's currently zoned strip development. That's not necessarily accurate. The zoning is C4. I just wanted to make sure that that was aware. The applicant, again, they've submitted some information that wasn't necessarily accurate. Right now, the unit count would be a total of 178 units. That gives you a density units per acre of roughly 26 units per acre. It calculates to a little less than that, but you round up. It's 26 units per acre, which would require an R3 zone. And I do believe they would need a variance for building height, because I do not believe that they can exceed the building height, but we're getting a little beyond the zoning and the land use policy aspect of this. But this is what was submitted to staff. This is a graphic. It's a figure ground graphic. It's fairly simple. It shows some existing building envelopes out there now in relation to what these building envelopes would look like in space. It just gives you a sense of the intensity or what would be. This is your land use zoning graphic. Again, your land uses are in the colored fill. The land use here is a commercial center. It's a brighter pink magenta. We were talking about commercial corridor in red for some of that prior properties on this agenda over here. But this is your highest intense zoning and land use policies. So your zoning and your land use policy here are consistent with one another. And again, just pointing out this office land use here, and we talked about that residential transition area as one heads west from here. Again, I won't read directly from the report. If the commission has any questions for staff or myself, please feel free. But essentially, the staff does not support amending the adopted land use plan, and thusly does not support the applicant's request to change the underlying zoning to R3. And the rationale is based on the three items that you see in front of you, A, B, and C. I can reiterate those for the betterment of those participating, or I can leave that to the Planning Commission chair.
Go ahead and read those because they're important.
Yes, sir. So staff's rationale for not supporting would be based on the fact that the current land use policy commercial center is consistent with the existing C4 zone. Changing the zoning from C4 to R3 does not conform to the comprehensive land use plan. And lastly, the commercial land uses have been planned for this site and this area through multiple city adopted comprehensive land use plan updates. And if there's anything else that other staff and participants from the city would like to opine upon, but this is what was presented to you in the staff report.
Okay, because we're looking at the possibility of revision to the land use plan, this does require a public hearing. Were any of the comments that were submitted to the city prior to the meeting specific to the land use?
Mr. Middleton, there is one comment that touches upon land use, but it's in conjunction with, we do not support the rezoning and land use request. So it's,
Okay.
it's a combination.
I'll open the public hearing. We'll go ahead and read the comments that have been submitted for
Okay.
the record.
Now, Mr. Middleton, are you asking for all the comments for both the rezoning and the land use?
They probably all speak to the reason whether the plan should be changed. So yes.
Okay. I'm going to read them, and I'm going to get very close to the speaker so everyone can hear. Okay. We received 8 comments to the permits@cityofsherwood.net email address. The first comment I'm going to read is from Dr. David Hill of Hill Family Dental. I am Dr. David Hill of Hill Family Dental, and I own the strip center that touches the property and shares the access road connecting to Warden Road. My center has medical-related and professional tenants. I think safety is a prime consideration. The common access road may be suitable for commercial development, but it is not suitable for high-density apartments. We have already had numerous times the access was blocked. One was when a car left Warden Road and wrecked, blocking the access for a long time. Another was when a semi-truck jackknifed, as examples. Bearing Cross Church had a medical emergency, and it showed that if paramedics or an ambulance miss the turn, they have to go all the way around Landtrip and make their way back to Brockington and then to Warden Road. This is valuable time lost. Also, the large Sherwood fire truck has difficulty making the turn. It took a spotter in front and one on Warden Road as it slowly crept over the curb. It is difficult to turn on and off Warden Road now, and will be much worse with well over 250 more cars that these 178 units would bring. Any accident blocks access for any emergency in our clinics or the proposed apartment complex. Children or adults leaving the proposed apartments on foot would have to walk along Warden Road, which is the access road for the interstate. I have seen the police call logs for calls to apartment complexes near the property, and the businesses surrounding this tract are very concerned about increased crime, vandalism, and other safety issues. And lastly, I have not met a single business owner or property owner surrounding the proposed apartment complex that is in favor of the zoning change. We ask that you do not downgrade the current C4 zoning to R3. There is no purpose in zoning if you make large exceptions and spot zone areas. This defeats the purpose of a good zoning plan. This is not a good thing for the city of Sherwood, the police, the fire department, and this has already come up twice and been discussed at city meetings with very large turnouts against any zoning change for apartments. I regret that we are not able to attend these meetings in person to show our strong opposition to any change in zoning for apartments. There are other places for an apartment complex without sacrificing land in the path of commercial development. Comment number 2 is from Mr. Nishant Patel, owner of the Best Western Sherwood Inn and Suites. Hello, my name is Nishant Patel, owner of Best Western Sherwood Inn and Suites. I am emailing about number 4, rezoning the apartment complex going up on Warden Road along Bowling World Road. I am against rezoning from C4 to R3 because of the safety and privacy of my hotel guests. We strive to provide clean, comfortable, and quiet accommodations to our hotel guests, and with an apartment complex being built, that will compromise my hotel and everything that I've worked hard for. With apartment complexes, crime rate goes up and extensive foot traffic as well. I hope you understand that as a business, we are held accountable for the safety of our hotel guests and cannot and will not stand for anything compromising the comfort of our guests who pay a considerable amount of money to stay somewhere safe and quiet. We have contracts with the local military police, as well as 2 other branches of our military, to stay with us weeks out of the month. I do not and cannot afford to lose business because of extra crime and foot traffic, and not to mention the noise. I hope you take into consideration what I have explained and put yourself in my shoes. This hotel is not only my investment, but it is my livelihood, and this is how I feed my family, and it brings business to the city of Sherwood as I advertise and pull business from other cities to bring the guests to stay at our hotel in Sherwood, which entail give Sherwood extra business and recognition. Signed, Nishant Patel, Shiv Shakti Hospitality LLC. Comment number 3. This is from Frank Cope, Central Business Equipment Incorporated. Short and sweet. I am against the rezoning of the property next to us. Mr. Cope is at 7499 Warden Road. Comment number 4. Comment number 4 is from Thomas and Lauren Bartoli. To whom it may concern. Regarding the proposed rezoning and land use of the property off Bowling World Road, specifically the land behind the building at 7507 to 7517 Warden Road, Sherwood. This land has been brought up to this commission multiple times for rezoning to residential, and we have had the same issues and concerns each time. Our concerns continue to relate to the safety hazards that would be present with With the increased traffic, both vehicular and pedestrian, to our businesses, our staff, and our customers, as well as the safety of those who may live in the residential area. During the time since these meetings, nothing has changed with the property, and thus, I would believe that none of our concerns have changed. In the effort to remain brief, I will list the major concerns that we have regarding this rezoning. Again, the concerns I am presenting are pertaining to the hazards related to the increased traffic and its impact on our businesses and the safety of our staff and customers. Number one, the access to this area is confined to one narrow access road that is not adequate for the amount of traffic that is likely being proposed. As it currently stands, it is a difficult and often dangerous task to enter the drive as configured. This is especially true if a vehicle is exiting the drive at the same time. Additionally, the speed of traffic on Warden Road makes the need to slow to a near stop to enter the drive at a dangerous near stop to enter the drive a dangerous action. I and others have requested a traffic study for this on each of the previous attempts to rezone this property. The addition of potentially 150 to 200 vehicles to this small road would also adversely affect the businesses present. The nature of at least 2 of these business deals with elderly clients that would be at a greater risk with increased vehicular traffic. The increased traffic flow would result in much greater difficulty to enter and exit these businesses. The addition of the proposed, based on the numbers from previous proposals, traffic will likely have a negative financial effect on these businesses. Number 3, the narrow drive and the above mentioned traffic issues would also make accessibility to emergency vehicles, fire, ambulance, and police exceedingly difficult. At the last meeting this was raised at, we specifically cited the difficulties noted by delivery trucks, UPS, FedEx, and the like, entering and exiting the property. Our concern lies with the accessibility of a fire truck into the drive, especially if there is outgoing traffic. I believe this was attempted last time this was brought up and determined to be inadequate space. Number 4, additionally, if this is residential property, the likelihood of large numbers of school children needing access to school buses is also a concern. As mentioned, the drive is inadequate for access of school buses. The stopping of school buses for the pickup and drop off of children on Warden Road is not acceptable or safe. Additionally, the foot traffic of children through the current business property is not safe nor appropriate. Number 5, prior to any of these issues related to the increased traffic of having residents on this property, we must also be concerned with the access of the numerous large construction vehicles and trucks that will be necessary for development. These 2 will create significant safety issues to the current occupants of the commercial property. These concerns, as I mentioned earlier, pertain to the safety issues that would be attributed to the increased traffic created with the addition of a residential property. We have proven to this committee before that this property is not adequately situated for the type of access and traffic required for a residential complex. I have refrained from mentioning the obvious public safety issues that could also be of concern because I know that others who are concerned with this project will mention. Additionally, we find it difficult to be able to properly present our side without access to the proposed plans or hearing the proposal beforehand. With that said, my comments here are the same common sense points we have made on each of the previous committee meeting regarding this land use and zoning amendment. Again, I emphasize that we have presented these arguments against a residential property on this site multiple times. In that span, nothing has been done or changed about the configuration or access to the proposed property. We find it difficult to understand how any decision could be different in light of that fact. Sincerely, Thomas Bartol, Lauren Bartol, DPM.
Your address.
Oh, excuse me, 7509 Warden Road. Next comment is from Mr. Mark Weber, business and landowner of Weber Automotive Repair at 5691 Commerce Court. My name is Mark Weber. I am the business and landowner of Weber Automotive Repair at 5691 Commerce Court. I hope this email is finding you well during this time. I would like to voice my concerns regarding the rezoning of commercial to residential properties along Bowling World Road. As residents, you and I both want the best outcome for Sherwood. 2 times prior to this, the construction of apartments in this area has been rejected due to substantial reasons. These reasons include, but are not limited to, the following: increase in traffic flow due to a limited access of the entrance exit of the complex, difficulties for emergency responders to enter the facilities due to a single entrance exit, and evidence supported of increase in crime that correlates with an increase in population. Due to the commercial aspects of this area, businesses are more tax lucrative than residential and overall more beneficial to Sherwood. Additionally, I would like to personally know the benefits of spot zoning such as this. To my understanding, spot zoning allows for these areas to fall apart over time since there is a lack of cohesiveness within the community. When this commercial property is downgraded to residential, it doesn't allow the support of commercial business. As a business property owner, I strongly oppose this rezoning. This area promotes industrial and commercial businesses and has been proven successful for these companies for years. I believe interfering with the dynamics can decrease the overall productivity of Sherwood. Previous experiences that have been reported by emergency first responders, such as firefighters, state that it is a nightmare when trying to navigate the restricted entrance exit. This can decrease the productivity of these heroes when faced with a life and death situation. Regarding safety of residents, building apartments off of Wharton Road creates an increase in dangers for pedestrians. The apartments will be accessed through Wharton Road, which does not promote safe pedestrian travels. This road was designed for the use of cars and other automobiles, not the leisurely pace of foot or bicycles. That being said, there are no sidewalks to support this method of transportation. Finally, it has been documented in 2017 alone, there were over 40 pages of reported police calls at Sherwood Apartments due to the following: harassment, terroristic threats, missing persons, armed robbery, warrant of arrest, suspicious activity, and stolen property, as well as others that are not listed. Please refer to Dr. David Hill for more information regarding these statistics. Thank you for your time and considering my voice and the voice of others regarding this rezoning. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to contact me. And he lists his phone number. Should I read it?
Sure, it's in the record.
Yes. Okay. 501-835-8582. That is for Mr. Mark Weber. And he also has Dr. David Hill's phone number in the record. Please refer questions to Dr. David Hill for more information regarding the crime statistics at 501-834-4066. Sincerely, Mark Weber. Best wishes, Mark Weber, owner of Weber Automotive Repair. Next comment is from the pastor of Bearing Cross Baptist Church, Derek Allen, pastor. To whom it may concern, as pastor of Bearing Cross Baptist Church, I am writing to address items number 3 and number 4. Bearing Cross Baptist Church would ask that the Sherwood Planning Commission and Board deny the zoning amendment from C3 to R3 as per the letter from Candy Ussery dated May 5th, 2020, or from C4 to R3 as per a conversation with Shannon, city planner, on 11 May 2020. It is our opinion that this change will devalue our property and the property around parcels 23S05300000503 and 23S00300037005, north of Wharton Road and off of Bowling World Road. Moreover, we feel that constructing 175 to 200 apartment units on this property would increase the traffic along Wharton Road and create unsafe conditions because of the one-way into and out of the planned multifamily facility. It could also increase traffic in the parking lots of nearby businesses, including our church property, as people try to shortcut to the planned property. Practically speaking, our parking lot is not constructed to handle such an increase in usage, especially if it is used as a passageway by large trucks and vehicles. Thank you for your attention to this matter. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me at the church office, 501-833-2347. Sincerely, Derek Allen, pastor.
And for the record, the address, Bearing Cross Baptist Church, is in that it's next door to the subject property.
And I don't have that address listed here. Okay. The next comment is from Alva Fisher, a longtime deacon of Bearing Cross Baptist Church. As a longtime member and deacon of Bearing Cross Baptist Church, I am writing to address items number 3 and number 4. Would like to ask that the Sherwood Planning Commission and Board deny the zoning amendment from C3 to R3 as per the letter from Ms. Candy Ussery, dated May 5th, 2020 and May 11th, 2020. It is my opinion this change would devalue our property, increase traffic flow through our drive and Warden Road, which has now become a safety concern. Approximately 200 apartments on this tract of land will present many of unknown challenges for the neighborhood and the city of Sherwood, including the decrease of highway business frontage, which hinders the increase of business and revenue in Sherwood. Thank you for your attention to this matter. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me at home, 501-835-4852, or cell phone, 501-681-5697. Sincerely, Alva Fisher. Final comment is from a representative for Sam Lantrip. This is from Sam Lantrip's grandson, Ian Douglas Lantrip Hickling. I, Ian Douglas Lantrip Hickling, am sending this email on behalf of my grandfather, Sam Lantrip, who does not have access to internet or a computer to send this email. I live at 850 Lantrip Road, and he lives at 900 Lantrip Road. This is what he wrote. I, Sam Lantrip, have the property west and down the power line 740 feet. I am against the rezoning from C4 to R3. It has been C4 for many years and should stay commercial land. Parcels 2350530000900 and 2350030003705 are not fit for large-scale multifamily. It has been turned down 2 times before. This is not good for the city of Sherwood, for the police department, and the fire department. I hope this zoning change is turned down. Signed, a concerned property owner. He also wanted to note that in the item it says zone C3 when it is supposed to say zone C4. Thank you. Ian Douglas Lantrip Hickling, 850 Lantrip Road.
On that last one, would you repeat again the parcel numbers that were in that comment?
Yes. Parcels 2350530009000 and 2350030003705.
The first one's incorrect.
Yeah, the first one is that other parcel.
Yeah, the first one's for the land trip.
For the record, the 2 parcels in question, I think we're correct in the report. It was parcel number 23, S as in Sam, 0030003705. And then the second parcel being 23, S as in Sam, 05300000503.
I think we can assume that they just mixed a parcel number up because it doesn't make sense
Right.
to the statement. Okay, does anybody else wish to speak to this? Is anybody? Okay, I'll call the public hearing closed. Discuss.
From the staff's side, we would like to recognize the lack of other C4 property in the city that currently exists. That's simply an observation, knowing the conversations and discussions we've had over the past couple of years for requests that have come through for C4. So having this available, I think, has its own benefit, and certainly agrees with the flavor of the area.
That's all you had to say. Everything else is just.
My biggest concern of all was how are you gonna move all the traffic out of there? That's a bad area anyway. No matter what, and I have seen no other way out. Something, minimum of 178 places, probably coming up to about 300. Most people have 2 cars.
Well, the issue before us right now is whether we think it would be appropriate to revise the land use plan to change it to high density residential.
Make a motion to deny.
We have a
Second.
motion and a second.
Bruno,
Aye for deny.
Gillum,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Middleton.
Aye. Now, the next item is the requested zoning amendment, which we will go ahead and hold a public hearing, but the comments that were applied to the land use plan will apply to this. Now, are there any other comments that anybody wishes to make regarding the zoning specifically? If anybody wants to comment, they should raise their hand. Seeing none, I close the hearing. Discussion of commissioners.
I think the people that commented on this proposal nailed on the head. This site is totally will not work for housing. It's correctly zoned right now.
Frankly, we don't have a lot of choice here because we have just denied changing the land use plan. So we really only have one choice.
I move that we deny the request to rezone.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Call the roll.
Bruno,
Aye.
An aye is to deny it.
Aye for deny, yes.
Gillum,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Middleton.
Aye.
Amending the zoning code regarding accessory buildings in residential districts 141009.
Mr. Gambrell?
Yes, sir. So this was something that the staff had asked be presented to the Planning Commission. We've been going through various sections of the regs, and this is one section in particular that deals with accessory buildings. It's a fairly simple red line change, as you can see on your screen. 141009 accessory buildings. Right now, the way it reads is the height of the accessory building shall be measured from the bottom of the sole plate to the top of the uppermost plate and shall be governed as follows. Well, the new language would simply read measured from the bottom of the sole plate to the underside of the roof deck and shall be governed as follows. And then the same language would apply in terms of the lot size and how that dictates sidewall height. Mr. Andy Wilson with the city also helped provide some additional information to present to the commission. I will pull that up on your screen. I do think that we had some discussion today at the PRC about this graphic, and perhaps the top and the bottom weren't necessarily exemplifying the language that's being presented. So if Mr. Wilson would like to opine here, he can.
Well, the top illustration and the bottom really wouldn't raise the sidewall height of the building because they bear on the top chord. It's the center three we're talking about. Just if you stack those on top of a wall, the height of the truss is gonna add to the sidewall height. But the way we have our ordinance worded now, it doesn't prevent that from happening. That's what we're trying to prevent. We had a case where the sloping top chord house configuration was added to a building, putting it a few feet over the restricted height of sidewall height of 17 foot that the planning commission and the city council agreed to.
Okay, this requires a public hearing. Did we receive any comments on this?
No.
Does anybody wish to make a comment or make a statement about this? Again, I'll give it a few minutes in case anybody wants to chime in. Hearing none, I'll call the public hearing closed. Commissioners, do you have any questions of staff? If no questions, is there a motion?
I move that Motion we, go ahead, Lucian. Okay, I move that we accept this new language as presented tonight.
That's a second.
I have a motion and a second.
Bruno,
Aye.
Gillum,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Middleton.
Aye. Is there any old business to pick up? Actually, fences should have been an old business. So let's take up the final plat for Bear Park 3 first.
The final plat for Bear Paw 3 the request has been presented to us to review that. One of the requirements is that everything be completed in order for final plat to be approved. Everything is not complete, specifically the road bed, and that's only because of the wet weather. That particular condition, rainfall and wetness, that's for every project in town. So they're expecting with some, short amount of dry weather to be able to get in there and complete that. And they believe that they could get that done before the June meeting. So they would prefer if the commission would agree that the water and sewer are in and that the infrastructure is being built correctly. And I can attest to that. Our engineer inspector and our stormwater manager are looking at this regularly. And of course, we are aware that it's not complete, but we're aware that they are doing a good job constructing it. So we will watch it, and we can go through the checklist and confirm that everything is done prior to advising Mr. Middleton that everything is done. So if you've got a concern about it and you would rather wait until the June meeting to hear this, we could do that. Or if you would like to go ahead and grant the request to pre-approve this, so to speak, knowing that there's primarily it's just the road bed that lacks, that we will be inspecting that and confirming that it is done. There is a little urgency to this, and that is real, because the lots are needed at this time for construction.
Commissioners, do you have any questions?
Thomas, did I miss anything on my comments?
Can y'all hear me first of all?
Yes.
Good. No, you portrayed what we're trying to do. Just trying to basically save about anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks. Basically, get it approved earlier. Basically.
And this is not accepting a final plat based on any, promise of finishing something. This is actually waiting until it's done. So we will be waiting and confirming that it is totally complete before advising Mr. Middleton that it's ready to be signed.
Right.
Well, I don't have any issue with signing the final plat once everything's complete and you've got all the documentation you need. So I'll make the motion that we accept it pending the documentation and completion of construction.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
Bruno,
Aye.
Gillum,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Middleton.
Aye.
Thank you, commissioners.
Who has a child speaking up behind them?
It's probably me. It's probably me. I'll mute it now. Thank you.
Good luck. Next item.
Discussion on amending the zoning code regarding fences.
Mr. Gambrill?
Yes, sir. Good evening. So on your screen and also sent to the commission was a planning commission, we're calling it a discussion document. We went over this document a couple times over the last month or so, and it's gone through a couple of iterations with the plan review committee, including Mr. Chair. So the version you received and the one I'm going to present on the screen are essentially the same. There are a few differences with what I'm showing on the screen. Namely, there's a lot of formatting and things that are quirky with a Word document that I'm not going to show. I'm also not going to show a lot of the comment inserts that you all may have seen in your margins. So this should be a little bit easier to read, not only for us, but for anyone that is participating virtually. So what we wanted to do with the fence code, as it were, is to simply remove some repetitive language. That was something that, and I think this commission remembers some of this discussion, in that you had each different zone class had a section in it that dealt with screening, and we felt like that was redundant, in that screening is addressed and can be addressed in one section rather than repeating it over and over and over again. So that was one of the things we wanted to do, is simplify it in that way. And then we also wanted to look at the structure. So the way it's structured it's not as though we're regulating fences much differently, but we're arranging it so that it's easier to regulate from, and it's also easier for your code enforcement and your permit issuers to use. There's also a couple of key issues that staff wanted to address over our discussions, and Mr. Wilson is intimately involved in a lot of these, so I thank him a lot for his contributions, as well as the rest of the staff. One of the major concerns was dealing with corner lots where you have side yard or front yard or vice versa. And in corner lots, you can effectively have two front yards. And so trying to address those issues in your fence code is something that we need to do. So as I go through this, I will simply just reiterate some of the things that we've already talked about. So you can see in front of you the struck language is what's already been there before. So we're removing existing lots of record. We didn't feel like that was contextually necessary with respect to the fence or the walls or hedges. So we removed that. But getting into the meat and potatoes of our red line revisions, you can just read it for yourself. The one thing in yellow that we came up with today during our PRC, which you do not see on your screen, it says must not extend behind any front building lines. And in your version, there's a bunch of additional language that we felt like was not clear. So we felt like that clarified things a lot easier. So you'll want to take a look at your document in hard copy and just compare it with item D.
You say unless provided for under section 141002, the fence constructed must not extend beyond any front building lines.
That's
So-
correct.
Does that mean that on the side of the house it can? I think I like the old one that said nor beyond any side building line on corner lots.
Well, if you'll read the preface here where it says unless provided for under section 141002, which we will get to very shortly, that helps to address exactly what you're talking about, Mr.
Okay.
Gilman. And I see Mr. Wilson raising his hand. Mr. Commissioner, would you like to recognize Mr. Wilson?
Oh, I couldn't see him. Go for it, Andy.
That's what Lucian asked. We've got a lot of history together, and I think one of the things we do want to work out in this discussion is how we're going to treat corner lots and what the provisions of the changes we're making in the document we're reviewing now, how that's different from what we've been doing things. And I just want to state for the record what our existing code says under 1410.02 about the corner lots in residential districts. I think that's what Lucian is basically speaking to.
Yes.
And
I will forward.
This is exactly what it says, and this is how we've been operating. It says the city of Sherwood is concerned that the erection of fences in yard space fronting on streets may impair the sight distance of the operator of moving vehicles on street to the extent of creating a traffic hazard, and that the erection of fences such as these may obstruct the view from dwellings placed on adjoining lots. So what we have typically done when there was a request in a fence application to extend the fence into the front yard or the building setback on the side of a house, is we would go out and determine if it was creating, one, any sight distance traffic hazard issues, and two, depending on the curvature of the street and the location of the driveways on the adjacent properties, whether it was a fence constructed out past the building line would obstruct the neighbor's view of the neighborhood when essentially they walk out on their front, out of their front door. If they could see, if all they were seeing when they looked to the left or the right was a fence instead of being able to see their neighborhood. And one of the things that I think we've really enjoyed in Sherwood, and I still think it's is this, we have this openness in our front yards because we have restricted fences. At the same time, we've tried to balance that with people that own corner lots being able to get full enjoyment of their property when it doesn't cause one of these issues for people on the road or their neighbors. The new language that we have right now, and we're gonna touch on this later on in this discussion, but the new language essentially, the biggest changes that we're proposing as we discuss this is, one is we are entering into a discussion, which, we're elaborating on a discussion we've already shared with the Planning Commission on allowing fences up to 48 inches in the front yard setbacks. We've never had that before, and that may have some bearing on what we're talking about now. And if we don't mimic the language of our old ordinance in terms of us going out there and making a judgment call along these two criteria, then what we're going to have is a situation where if anybody wants to extend a fence into their front building line either on the side of their house or in front of their house, that would exceed 4 foot, depending on how the commission decides that issue, they would have to go to the planning commission for approval in every case.
I can show you a place where there is a fence extending into their side yard, and the next door neighbor's garage on the other side of around the corner. When he's backing out of his garage, he has to be very careful because he can't see if traffic is coming.
That's the type of thing right now that we go out and look for. And I will say this, and I'm not defending anything, but a lot of fences are out there that were built in areas that were annexed into the city, but that is exactly the kind of thing right now that we go out and I'll pull into the driveway or the alley or the street corner or whatever and imagine the proposed fence to see if it's creating that exact kind of problem. And typically we will have people sometimes that want to go out to the property line, and the house that's behind theirs has a driveway that is adjacent to the subject corner lot, and that's exactly the problem. You can't back out of the driveway without seeing the traffic. So typically in that case, we'll tell them, no, you can't do what you proposed, but we might allow them to move it as close as 10 foot to the property line. And that gives you, with the public right-of-way behind the curb is about 10.5 foot, plus the 10 foot, that gives you a good 20 foot clear area to be able to see what's coming before the tail end of your vehicle is out into the road. And I think we'll still be faced with making these decisions. It's just now, essentially, it's the city engineer's decision, the way our ordinance reads, and he's assigned that to me. Whereas if we don't keep something along the same language, we're going to move that responsibility to the planning commission if somebody has a request to do that.
The fence I was talking about is 6 feet tall. And I wish I could remember the two streets at the corner, but I've gone blank on it.
One of the other things that's we're going to enter into this conversation a little later on, and this might be a fence you're talking about, is the situation where we have somebody that has an existing privacy fence that in a lot that was annexed into the city, and it's kind of been a non-conforming use or a non-conforming fence, and they want to replace it with, theirs is rotting and old, and they want to replace it with a new fence. How are we going to handle that? In the past, we have always allowed like for like. And we do address that a little later on in the document. And I think maybe some of this discussion we should continue as we progress into this document, because right now we are under the, general commercial zoning district restriction. That's where we're at in this conversation. And I don't want to get, too far in because what's going to become apparent here is for all commercial properties, essentially, if they want to build a fence in their front building, beyond their front building line, that is going to require planning commission approval if, some of the balance of this document gets adopted. So I think if we move forward, we'll go back and address these issues a little bit, maybe more in context.
So as we progress through this, thank you, Andy.
Yes.
So as we progress through this, again, to to the point of 141002, it is referenced here, and we are in the general commercial zoning, but that is one of the primary issues, and we're going to get to that in a moment. But as I alluded to before, every single commercial or non-residential zone actually has a screening language, which we are striking. So that is the only reason why you see each one of these. Basically, it's the same language, a little bit of difference based on the context of the zone class, but you can see how each one is being struck. C1, C2, your CSC, or shopping center district, has the same general language. C3 has that same general language, as well as C4. So all of that is being proposed to be struck. 14.6 office districts, similarly, those things are being struck. This here is just for Scrivener's purposes. There was some pagination issues with respect to what the actual code reads, so that just needs to be corrected. That's just an administrative note. But the substance remains the same. You have these office district restrictions, again, screening, special purpose office districts, screening, and then your general office district screening, all being proposed to be struck. 1410, special provisions and use standards. The section 1410.1 currently reads fence and screens. We're just going to rename it fence requirements. We thought that spoke more accurately to what the city wants to regulate for in this section of the code. 1410.02, referenced earlier, if you'll recall. Fence requirements. There's applicability. Before, it started off with residential only, or I'm sorry, residential applicability. Right now, this will be applicable regardless of whether it's residential or non-residential. You're going to have requirements in this section shall apply to the following. So there's a lot of language in here about intent and purpose, and that's well and good. And perhaps this was lifted from the adopting ordinance that originally put this in here. I do not know, but the staff felt like that was not necessary to regulate from and just wanted to stick to the applicability and then deal with the requirements of the section shall apply to the following. And then there are several items here. The first one being new construction of new fence. Second one, extension of or addition to an existing fence. And then there's the replacement issue, which we talked a little bit about this morning. Right now, we're having the first item under replacement A read replacement of an existing fence that is a different size at a different location or of a different material, i.e. chain link fence being replaced by a wood privacy fence, for example. And then the second item, B, under the replacement, deals with replacement of more than 50% of the linear length of the existing fence. I highlighted this because this came out of our plan review committee discussion this morning. Not that it isn't included in your current packet, but that we wanted to have this larger discussion with the Planning Commission about existing fences and whether they're non-conforming with respect to how we're writing today's regulations and how the city wants to treat them from a policy standpoint. If Mr. Wilson or other staff, I can see Andy's hand raised, this is a good time for us to discuss this point with the commission.
Andy, you brought this up. What was your point?
I'm gonna just recommend that all the planning commission members make a note of this sentence and that we actually discuss it when we get to the section concerning the situations where we're not issuing permits and the planning commission is going to decide. Because the issue here is historically in Sherwood, we have always allowed a like-for-like replacement. And if somebody had a chain link all the way out to their property line and they were going to replace it with a chain link, we would allow it. If they wanted to replace it with a opaque wood privacy fence, we would look at it just like a new application and we wouldn't allow it because it's not like for like. And the same thing would apply if somebody had a wood privacy fence, let's say in a front yard setback on a corner lot on the side of their house. We typically would allow them to replace their old rotten fence with a new one, like for like. If we add this section B, then we would deny that application to go out as close to the road, depending on what we decide on corner lots. You know, it's just hard to talk and say right now because I don't know what we're going to decide on corner lots. If we decide to handle it the way we have historically handled it, and we've got some wording in there to that effect, then this is fine like it is. If we decide we're not going to allow anybody to build fences in any front yard setbacks without explicit, you know, let's say over 4 foot, if we decide to allow the 4 foot fences in the front yard, you know, are they going to have planning commission approval? Or, you know, there's just a lot of unanswered questions here to elaborate too far, but this is an important idea on replacement fences, is how it affects the planning commission, because the way things are now, and I don't know that y'all are aware of just how much goes into these fence, you know, conversations every week and helping people work out our rules. But, you know, if we're not making the decisions in here, y'all are going to get busy making the decisions at the planning commission level, because when somebody's had an old fence and they've had it for a long time and they want to just replace it, and we come along and tell them, no, you can't do that, they're going to want to talk to somebody.
Continue, Mr. Gambrill.
Yes, sir. So we're dealing with the different applicability. Again, we're dealing with replacement. We just had that discussion. Building permit required. It originally read fence, and there is no fence permit. It's literally lumped in with the building permit process. And then a building permit shall be obtained prior to beginning construction and replacement of all applicable fences. And then the following items shall be submitted. And this is not new language, but it's one that we need to review for this session here. There's supplemental materials that will be on forms provided by staff. There will be a fee, and you'll have to pay that required fee. Again, site plan details was struck. This was language that had been in here. We are not going to utilize a site plan or a cut sheet, as it were, but we are going to have the review and approval. And once all the required information is submitted, it'll be reviewed by the Planning Permits Inspection Department for compliance. And if it's approved, a building permit will be issued. And there's a couple sub items here that are important. Permits shall be issued for all fence applications that meet the regulations stated herein. Number 2, applications that do not meet the regulations as stated herein shall apply to the Planning Commission for review of and approval for a waiver from the strict applications of the regulations. From this morning's Planning Review Committee meeting, the staff, and I think for the betterment of the Planning Commission too, you all want to know the process or what it is that might deviate from a condition in the regs. And staff and Mr. Middleton came to waiver. So we felt like waiver was a good language to use in here. And then Mr. Middleton provided a strict application of the regulations just to make sure that the commission was had its focus narrowed a bit with respect to the fences. And then the Planning Commission shall include parameters as follows. These were different general rules that we felt like we needed to articulate in the code. Safety and security could be a unique circumstances. Federal and or state regulations unusual topography and grade. Access, maintenance easements could be an issue with strict compliance. And then there's the non-conforming fences issue that Mr. Wilson was speaking to with the 50% rule as currently stated for replacement. So this is why the non-conforming came in, and Mr. Wilson is raising his hand. Mr. Wilson would like to qualify. It'd be great.
Yeah, just to help out all the other planning commissioners that haven't been privy to all the discussions we've had here. You know, basically what this says, if you've got another situation, really for any commercial application like Delta Dental, where they want to put some type of fence that is going to be in their building setback, your front yard building setbacks, because of reasons of security was the case there. Or in the case of item 3, unusual topography, sometimes somebody may want to build that 10-foot fence, kind of like we've got right over here between the swimming pool by City Hall and the neighborhood, because the topography gave the residents and the people using the pool a little bit more privacy. So they decided, somebody along the line decided to build a 10-foot fence there. So that's what these things kind of address. We felt like number 2, there might be a federal building built in Sherwood that requires a special fence of some kind that's outside of our height requirements, or et cetera, et cetera. So that's the kinds of things these are designed to give the Planning Commission the latitude to grant waivers for good cause.
Thank you, Andy. And then after you go through your review and approval process, there's, of course, compliance. All fences must be installed in compliance with the fence regulations and with the information shown on, and this was added on, an approved site plan. Again, we don't have site plan as an application material, but if it's part of a larger plan or something that had to come through staff administratively or the Planning Commission, you want to make sure that you are still in compliance with that regulating instrument. So that's why an approved site plan is added in there. So if anyone has any questions about that, we can talk about that, but that's the intent behind that word being put. Inspection required, that was struck because we have a building permit and we do not have a separate fence permit, and inspections are already performed, and administratively the staff felt like this section was not necessary. Fence location. This is getting back to some of our original discussion about yards. So right now it starts off with fence location. Private property, all fences shall be located on private property and shall be built with the consent of the property owner. Correct location of property, fences shall not encroach into any neighboring property lines. Second item under location, utility easements. The fence enclosing utility easement shall have a gate installed to allow access to the easement. 3 deals with drainage. Fences shall not impede the normal flow of stormwater, including drainage channels. 4th item, access easement. Fences shall not be constructed over a public access easement. Fences proposed over private emergency access easements must be approved by the fire department to ensure adequate access for emergency vehicles and equipment at all times. Site distance requirement, 141014 currently does not exist now. There is a proposed site triangle and line of sight section included in this. Staff can qualify that as we get further into the document, but it's basically a section here that deals with not encroaching on a line of sight. Fence design standards. This section is titled this way, again, because we lifted some of this from another jurisdiction. I think this came from Bentonville. Height is a design. It's a factor of design. We can call it something else, but this is what we've used here. There was some discussion early on in this process about how high the fence should be, just without any other consideration for yards. And so the staff felt like the maximum fence height shall be 8 feet, not necessarily 6, but unless provided for as follows. So we have an 8-foot rule, not 6. but then you deal with your front yard. Now, this is for the betterment of staff. This is not something, we discussed it a little bit this morning about graphics and trying to display this. And I did find some graphics that I'm hoping will help convey some of the ideas that we were talking about this morning. But we're dealing with front yard here. So the maximum height for a fence located in the front yard or positioned any closer to the front property line than the front surface of the building for a typical residential lot or commercial lot shall not exceed 4 feet in height. And so this graphic is attempting, let me know if this is, can everybody see this? This is, so if you can kind of imagine this area in here being that area where you can have a 4-foot fence, but anything behind here, this is not a corner lot necessarily, but you're dealing depth-wise going down. You have your 6, well, this should be 8 feet, so I apologize for that. But in relation to what we're talking about now, it would be 8 feet technically allowed here to the back, but then still remain 4 feet in here. Mr. Wilson, do you have any opinions on this?
Yeah, I just want to just make sure that everybody's clear on what we're proposing to change here. We have always, or since I've been working for the city of Sherwood, we have always maintained a maximum fence height of 8 feet, so that nothing has changed there. So that would not be a change. And then now we're proposing the change of allowing the decorative type fences in the front yards. And, you know, the only limitation that we're speaking of right here is that they would be allowed and they should not be opaque. That doesn't restrict us from, you know, adding some other restrictions like for example, the drawing Kevin's got in front of us shows the the fence right up on the sidewalk. You know, and there's nothing that says we couldn't say, well, they have to be at least 10 foot behind the front property line. You know, they couldn't go all the way out to the very end of the property line, but there would be some extra buffer. So just wanted to clarify.
Mm-hmm. So moving beyond that, then we deal with this corner lots. I added this in, again, this is for the betterment of everyone. So we have some language, we meaning Garber has some other clients where we've done some work on this, and I did lift some language regarding corner lots. So if you all want to read it with me, it's basically corner lots, any yard adjoining, we can say adjacent, but right now it reads any yard adjoining a street may be considered a, quote, front yard as defined by the code. Therefore, any fence on a corner street side must not extend beyond the primary structure. Mr. Wilson?
There's going to be a conflict with that when the rear yard is on a street, like across from the high school on Bear Paw is an example of that. With the language I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Because we would not consider that a front yard.
This was added as a way to sort of bridge this discussion between front yard and corner. We do not need to keep this. If this is something that staff does not want to use, or we want to change this language, still addressing corner lots, but we want to tweak this a bit, that's for the betterment of this discussion.
You know, I'd like to have, and maybe we can start over and then come back through it, but I'd like to get some input from the Planning Commission just on the idea of the 4-foot height in the front yards before we move to, you know, we're just moving right through everything and we're not really discussing these design criteria. Like, let's go back up to the fence height. Is the Planning Commission in agreement that we should continue the maximum or the correct height for allowable fences to be 8 foot is like a default?
I have no problem with that.
I don't either. 8 feet's fine with me.
I don't either.
I have mixed feelings about 4 feet in the front yard. I think it should be a little bit lower.
So we're all in agreement on the 8 feet for the other fences that are not in the front yard. Is that right?
That's right.
All right, we can check that one off as being approved for the purposes of drafting the ordinance. Now, yeah, now let's go to the front yard. You know, initially, we did bring this idea to the planning commission, and at that time, I believe we discussed 42 inches, which is actually 3.5 feet, along with a bunch of other stuff. But, you know, do we want to allow any kinds of fences in the front yard as a matter of default? And what is the correct height? And the other thing is, you know, it sounds like a really good idea when you think of the nice, you know, wrought iron fences and all that. But, you know, we have to consider when we draft the language for this idea, you know, we're liable to drive down Oak Brook here and see a white picket fence in one yard, a wrought iron fence in the other yard, some chicken wire in the next yard, unless we really are able to establish some standards.
What's your problem with chicken wire?
I don't have a problem with chicken wire.
Don't forget pallets.
I think we've established someplace what materials would be appropriate would take care of that. And my only concern was that allowing a fence in the front yard is mostly decorative. It's not for privacy. And I have a problem with it getting much over that 42 inches because the whole point of it is to be able to see either from the adjoining property or to be able to see into the property for police actions.
I agree. I support less than 4 feet.
Yeah, I like 42 inches too, also.
Does anybody know what a standard short picket is for height?
I think 40 to 42 inches is a fairly common that I have seen in other city codes.
I'm also going to suggest that instead of it saying decorative fencing such as split rail picket or wrought iron, that we name specific things. Decorative shall be decorative fencing, including or comprising split rail picket, wrought iron, but have specific things that will allow, that eliminates everything else, because people's idea of what's decorative and what's not can vary widely. And if they have an idea for a decorative fence that we haven't included in a more confining, you know, description, then they can always ask the planning commission for a waiver for the decorative fence they're proposing.
Yeah, I mean, if you say some kind of product or an equivalent or something like that.
Well, any latitude we give them is going to be hard when I'm processing an application. If I've got, and literally, I literally have a situation right now where I've got a resident who has applied to put up a chicken wire fence, a farm fence, essentially, in town. And there's nothing preventing him from doing that. And the neighbors are not happy about it. And this is a backyard situation for the most part. And it's, you know, but whatever. I'm just saying that if we're going to allow them, I think we need to have some, I won't say it right, but somebody say it for me.
Specificity.
Thank you. That's a tough word for me. But anyway, we need to be real specific on what is allowed by right, and everything else is excluded.
I agree.
You all should work on that because I think we generally agree with that.
Noted.
And I don't know that I like it going all the way to the right-of-way line like that picture has kind of indicated. I mean, I think we probably should come up with, you know, some distance away from that.
What's appropriate?
It's not right on top of the
5 foot, 10 foot?
5 foot, 10 foot. I mean, if you go to that 10 foot, that gives you, like you're saying, that around 20-foot number from back of curb to a fence. I mean, if and kind of keep that site line open, but still allow a property owner to build a fence in front of a building, in front of a house.
Can we
Front of the
nail that
building?
down with the other commissioners, whether 5 or 10 is the right number? I'm making notes here.
I would rather go with
I-
10 on my lot. 10 feet would put it halfway into the yard.
Yeah, now keep
Yeah,
in
I'm-
mind, on most typical lots, the majority of lots in Sherwood, the property line is 10.5 foot behind the back of the curb.
And then the house, then on a newer subdivision, the house is 25 foot from that point. So
That's correct.
you've got
5 plus 10 is
35,
15 feet.
36 feet, you know.
So if we go 5, that'll put it 15 foot off the street.
And the car ought to be able to see from an adjoining driveway, ought to be able to see what's coming up and down the street at that.
Everybody like 5 foot?
I can live with 5.
I like 5 foot too.
We do have a consensus on 42 inches for maximum height for these type.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I like 42 inches.
Okay, everybody ain't good with that?
Yeah.
Is 3 a quorum in this? I guess it is. I mean, I'm trying to get a majority here. Is that what we got?
You're not voting. This is just discussion.
Well, I know, but we're voting on what to put in the next draft.
Right, but this is just for
Yeah.
discussion purposes. That'll be brought back at another meeting at another time. Then there'll be a vote. So the quorum doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
I understand. I'm not asking for a vote. I'm asking for a consensus.
Well, you said quorum, that's kind of legal terms.
Okay, I meant consensus.
Yeah.
Okay,
What he's seeking right now is some advice.
so, and we are in agreement on having to be more specific for any fences, decorative fences in the front yard.
Yes.
And I'll provide the terms for that. And then they can be added to or subtracted at the next discussion. How's that sound?
Good.
Agree. I like it.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
fences in the front yard should be decorative. Or at least they should be good looking. You know, we don't.
Well, you know, it's like I said, one man's trash is another man's treasure.
And we have to be a little careful about aesthetics, but you could put some standards in there to give a general sense of it. Because Andy, you're right. One man's trash is another man's jewels.
Well, what if we did not use the term decorative or even ornamental, and we simply say what it isn't, like non-privacy / non-security? I don't know how you do that at this point, but
Well, at that point, you haven't restricted chain link, which everybody seems to not like.
Yeah, I think that's one reason we have to be specific, but you know, and I may be wrong here, but let's say the city of Sherwood decided that from now on, there would only be brown roofs in the city of Sherwood in all zoning districts or in particular zoning districts.
Because of state law, you'd lose that one in court immediately. Try another example.
Well, I mean, what I'm getting at is, you know, as long as it's enforced unilaterally, you know, are we restricted from making a statement about the types of fences we'll allow in the front yard? I think it's really a question for Steve Cobb, but I think probably as long as we're enforcing it unilaterally, we can do that.
Mr. Cobb, how far can we go on aesthetic?
The answer to your question is I don't know at this juncture because I'll have to look at that statute that was so controversial.
Well, that one had to do with the wrap of the house.
Well, no, there was a statute, wasn't there, Mr. Middleton, that passed this last time that was restrictive, or was that just on size of houses?
Now that was on the design and size of houses. There's very little you could do to restrict the envelope of the house.
Okay.
Yeah, there was the governor approved a state law that said you could no longer restrict the minimum size of a single family home.
So is the question, how restrictive can we be with respect to the materials or the design of a fence that appears in the front yard?
Yeah.
Like even if it's opaque, right? You have a variety of different opaque fences that you can see through where there is no sight distance, issue, right? Well, can you say, well, we don't like those chain link fences, even though they're opaque and you can see through them, we just don't like them. We prefer a different style.
Well, let me throw out something really controversial. Do we really want to have fences in the front yard at all?
I don't know that we should prohibit it.
I guess personally, if you're asking, my personal opinion as a citizen and as a code enforcement officer for the city of Sherwood, I think probably it would be okay to not, and just don't bring them out past 5 foot from the front building line of the house. We do have little decorative fences that are for courtyards and things. There's one right now on the corner of Rock Springs and Cliffside. So there's some argument for having them. For the most part, I'm against them unless we can add this kind of language that regulates the types that we're going to allow. If we can't do that, then we shouldn't allow them. Because you're going to have too many different types.
Some general restrictions, but how you word that. I don't want to tell grandma she can't have a little picket fence.
Well, I think a picket fence is a traditional fence. I think it would be recognized by the American Fence Association as a standard design for a decorative fence, and I think it's something that we would allow. In addition to that, we know what a split rail fence is. We know what wrought iron fences are. And, we can be kind of descriptive in that way. And in addition to that, in the sense of all fairness, if somebody has something different, I don't know, they want to make a fence out of recycled cans, and they want to make their case to the Planning Commission, they're allowed to do that. And then we can have a discussion about measuring it against some standards. Like we're going to get to item 3 here about just generally, but I wouldn't want to tell an artist, that might want to construct some type of defense that, it actually looks nice and it fits the, the intent of the ordinance. Now, I guess the reason we're talking to Steve is there's a side to this conversation is, well, if we do this, we might get sued. Well, what are the damages going to be if we do get sued? We told somebody they couldn't build a decorative fence because we didn't feel like it fit the description of what we allow and what we don't, and they sued us. What damages are they going to be able to show? What's our real exposure?
Well, probably not significant, but I'm not sure why we want to dangle that out there in the first place.
Well, I'm trying to, I'm thinking it will become self-evident of why, but we can always go this route, and then later on, if it becomes a problem, I guess we can try to be more restrictive or just eliminate the ability to do it anymore. If it's, I can see a situation where we would have, lattice fences next to wrought iron fences, next to picket fences, next to chicken wire fences. And I'm not being a smart aleck. Most people in Sherwood, try to do things that are in good taste and good keeping.
Well, Andy, you're right, and I'm appreciative of the significant amount of work you're pouring into this. So don't think I'm being critical. But what I got to tell you is what you just said is probably where this is headed, because if you don't have a standard, it's hard to regulate aesthetics. And I'm just sitting here thinking about driving down a street that's got literally all these fences in the front yard and none of them are the same. I mean, I think aesthetically it would be a train wreck.
Well, I don't think that would happen, and B, even if there is some mixture of styles, it just doesn't really bother me, as long as it is not unsafe.
Wouldn't bills of assurance handle this in some of your more conventional subdivisions? A lot of the bills of assurance or your covenants do restrict stylistically. They can regulate, aesthetics more so than the city can.
The bill of assurance certainly can, but what mostly regulates the aesthetics of fences now is just simple cost. It's a lot more cost effective to hire a fence company to come do a standard 6-foot privacy fence or a standard 4-foot chain link fence. But when you start reducing the height of fences and you can go out and buy 10 at PAX that's 30 inches high for $10 a sheet, all of a sudden you can start building a fence more cost effectively than you can hire, do it in the more customary manner.
I'll make a suggestion to move along.
Okay.
See if you can come up with some alternative wording that puts kind of a brackets, what sort of options are available for fencing in the front yard. I mean,
one idea might be to add the term no agricultural fences. That would eliminate chicken wire, hog wire, cattle panels, et cetera, that I could see people proposing to use. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about, but I'll work on some terms.
That's a good idea.
I'll bring up the non-conforming business. I did not want to see non-conforming fences wind up to the Board of Adjustment or under the non-conforming clause. That's for a different purpose. I think the point was, if somebody wants to do something different and to replace a fence, the 50% restriction is basically saying, if you are not conforming to our current standards, we don't want you to not conform to our current standards anymore. And if you have to replace it, we want you to replace it to our current standards. So the question that we have to ask ourselves is, do we want to come down hard and say, we're going to enforce our standards? Or do we want to give them some flexibility by saying, no, you can keep doing what you were doing? And if we're going to keep doing what you're going to doing, I'm not sure 50% makes any difference.
Well, I think you're exactly right, Rob. I think, if we're going to allow them to keep doing what we're doing, we need to take out the sentence that says replacement of more than 50% of the linear length of an existing fence. My opinion is, and I think it's kind of the culture of Sherwood, is to allow people to replace things that they had when they were annexed in, whether it be a fence or storage building or, any other improvement to their property when they were brought into the city. That, we typically have always allowed them to replace that or to continue its, upkeep.
But there are some standards when it comes to a non-conforming use, like you can't expand it, even if you came into the city with it a certain size, if it doesn't conform with the zoning. So I don't have a problem with putting some standards on the non-conforming replacement, but 50%, I don't care for that.
Well, we've got A that says replacement of an existing fence that is a different size. So if they add any length to it, that kicks in, or any height to it at a different location, or if they just place it on a different spot on their property. So, all we're really not clear on here is when they want to replace an existing fence with a fence that's just like it, it's just a new one. Privacy for privacy, same location, same height, same length, etc. And I do today get applications for fences for what normally would be like for like, but they're trying to move it up on closer to the front of their house so they can get a camper behind it on their driveway and stuff like that. And I just have to explain to them, I say, look, you can't do that. Right now, you've got a non-conforming use, and we do allow you to maintain it or to replace it like for like, but you can't change it.
Well, that's my observation to the commission. Do we want to make them conform or not?
Make them conform.
That's my opinion too.
Me too.
I want to make them conform. I mean, maybe B should read replacement of more than 50% of the total linear length of the existing fence or any portion of a non-conforming fence.
Something like that would make sense.
Yeah, I like that. Good idea.
Say that again.
Or any portion of a non-conforming fence.
Okay, so here's the other side of this. They come in, they make an application to replace their fence that they've had, and we tell them no, under our new rules, you can't do that anymore. And, the opening of this last segment of this discussion is taken away. I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me because it's something new, but the number 5 that we added under what the Planning Commission could provide a waiver for. As
Speak to that for just a second, Andy.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess in response to something you said earlier, I really don't want us to become the fence review board and get a whole lot of applications. I would a whole lot rather there be discrete requirements that you can enforce and the exceptions come to us.
Well, what we're talking about is the discrete requirements would be that they could not do a like for like fence anymore if there was if it was not in compliance with everything else we agreed to. When we settled this thing. And I just foresee people are going to be upset if they've had a privacy fence at their home for the last 30 years and they come to have it replaced by Engel Fence Company or whatever, and they're not doing anything different. It's just their old fence is falling down. Maybe they're doing it because our code enforcement officers went in there and told them they had to because it was presenting a problem. And then we tell them, well, you can't do that, okay? That's okay as long as we can tell them you can apply for an exception or a waiver, okay? Otherwise, all I have to say to people that are angry about that is you should call your alderman. And that's exactly where this will go, and that's okay. And we'll revisit the ordinance then. But I mean, people are not going to, they're not going to go, oh, okay. That's just not going to happen. They have to maintain all that yard, and in a case where it's not causing a sight distance issue and it's not blocking the view of the neighborhood, you really just don't have a good justification, and you can't explain it to them.
And can you not explain the standard?
I'm going to say at this point that I'll enforce anything that the city council ends up deciding on, but I think it's a mistake to think, it's okay to say, we're going to be real kind of hardcore and cut and dried on this issue. We don't want to make any more exceptions on these corner lots, but we don't want to talk to the people either. And that's kind of the position that you're putting us in. Well, we have to talk to the people. And I just think if you tell somebody they can't replace a fence they've had for a very long time because of a new standard that's going to exist in Sherwood, they're going to want to talk to somebody about it. So.
Well, Blake, what about any portion of a non-conforming fence that violates one of the conditions, some specific conditions, like that site distance.
Yeah, I mean, that gets it into that situation.
Now you're
What
hitting,
Andy's saying, I understand, there's going to be some pushback on that, but there are some things, I think, where we may want to insist that they don't do it anymore.
I agree 100% with the idea where it is creating a sight distance traffic hazard. That's a different story. We have a few of those in Sherwood. There's not very many of them, but there are a few.
More than you think.
Come again?
I said there's more than you think.
Well, I mean, I drive around this town all the time. I know where most of them are.
You probably do a lot better than I do, but.
I mean, there are some that it was just very difficult to get out. You know, right here on, I think it's Wilhite coming on to Kill, there's a chain link fence that comes out all the way to the corner, and that's, you know, it has a little ivy or whatever on it. It's a tough turn. Yeah. And we do have cases like that. And in those cases, you know, we could get the language right to where we absolutely require that they honor the sight distance triangle diagram or whatever we adopt as part of this ordinance. And I do think that's different.
I'm going to put words into Blake's mouth because I think
that's my biggest concern right there, Andy. That example at Wilhite and Kiel is a good one. That's a non-conforming use. If they want to replace it, we don't want them to put it back where it was, no matter what it is.
Absolutely.
Particularly with regards to that corner.
Right.
Well, let's work on this some more and try to get the language right. And I think we have kind of a consensus here. I'm not sure, but I think we do.
I'm going to put a comment here. Any portion of hold on here.
Yeah, reword that to make it fit. I mean, like I say, that Wilhite Kiel example is a problem that I don't want to see, just letting them replace like for like just because it's standard.
One idea, if you look up at the part that's been struck out where it talks about, you know, letting it be the engineer's decision, which is effectively still letting it be, you know, we go out and look at it. You know, maybe can be some wording in there that says any portion of a non-conforming fence that's being replaced may be subject to denial.
Okay. I mean, yeah, there may be some more language that needs to be added.
Because we go out there and we see, this particularly causes a problem concerning sight distance.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Whereas, you know, what we're eliminating here is concern when they're replacing a like-for-like fence that it blocks the view of the neighborhood, okay? Now, it always has, and the new one doesn't block it any worse.
I kind of like the idea of maybe reconsidering the city engineer being able, or the city planner, for that matter, making a finding. And then if they don't like that, they can appeal that decision to the Board of Adjustment.
One of you planners can construct a language to make all that happen. That sounds good. I just want there to be a safety valve, you know, for these delicate situations on these corner lots and when people are replacing fences. You know, I want us to use good judgment. You pointed out some things to me concerning the site triangle that I wasn't considering. You know, yeah, we don't need it when we get in that. No, you can't.
Hey, speaking of safety valves, what's the secret code to get in the men's restroom?
I can help you with that.
I'll be right there.
Yeah. I'll be right back. Wait a minute. Which restroom? Where are you?
Oh, I was going to go that way.
No secret code to the back one. Is there
are
any
y'all
more
here?
discussion on this?
So I added some language here to try to represent the context of this discussion in item B here. You know, we've talked about this replacement of 50%, and then we talked about, you know, portions of non-conforming fences, and then, you know, we're also dealing with those non-conforming that might present some sort of safety matter. I'm making it very general in here just so that we can mark it.
I'm going to throw out something else just to complicate things, just because that's what I do. Got a friend in Little Rock who has a rock wall in the front yard. It's probably no more than 2 feet tall. Guy built it himself. It's very attractive. It's not a fence. It's a wall. So how do you deal with something like that? And what about some of these really large estates that have a pretty substantial rock or even brick wall? Is that a fence or a wall? I don't have an answer.
That's going to be mostly addressed through your definitions. I consider it a fence.
Yeah. I haven't inserted it here yet. I'm going to, you know, fast forward to the end of this document only because there is a section here where we attempted to deal with some of the definitions. We did discuss that, you know, retaining walls are treated separately from fences, and that's something that we are going to, you know, we've made an attempt here to define it, what it is, but we also haven't put it in as a separate section independent of the fence discussion.
You know, we had a rather lengthy discussion with the Planning Commission several months ago about the retaining wall, you know, how to define a fence, and anything over 18 inches high was, you know, kind of the point we were making. That came out of the now defunct fence committee, but we talked about, you know, because 2 blocks or a couple of landscape ties that were serving some other purposes that were more landscaping, we wouldn't count those as fences. And I think we probably just need to work on our definitions generally, and after doing so, I think it'll address those issues of, well, that's a rock wall. Is that considered a fence? If the definition's right, it will be.
I'll just throw this out for you to munch on, that it could be opaque up to 2 feet tall, and anything over that has to be not opaque.
Yeah, I mean, that's
In the front
something you can add to that definition real easily.
Well, I mean, it'll depend a little bit on what we ultimately decide on what's allowed in the front yard too.
There's also this idea, again, it's getting back to the site triangle. It's a little bit separate from the fence discussion, but because we deal with these front yards and these corner lot issues, the current code does not have a line of sight at driveways and intersections section, but I added one in, and we've used this as a way to sort of catapult some of our discussions. So we do attempt to define what we call a site triangle, and then of course heights of obstructions. So if you've got a stone wall or something that's not opaque, you know, this is just an example. Do you want to have a clear line of sight between 3 and 8 feet from the finished grade? Well, as long as it's outside your site triangle, you can have a wall, you know, that's over this height, but it's all related to the site triangle. Now, different cities use different heights. Lincoln, for instance, uses a pretty conservative 2 to 10 foot threshold. Bentonville uses something, squeezes it in a little bit between 3 and 8.
I like 2 better. 3's getting pretty tall.
Yeah, I tend to agree. But we've done one for Lincoln, like, and a lot of places do the 2 to 10 because it keeps it a pretty wide area to keep tree canopies and things of that nature from encroaching. Again, on the site triangle, you can pick what site triangle you want to use. 25 feet is a pretty standard one on local streets.
Yeah. But that side triangle, I think that's critical. And 2 to 10, I like.
Yeah, I'll go with that.
So you could have like a decorative tree out there, maybe, as long as the canopy was above 10 feet. Is that the idea there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll go up. So we've kind of wrapped this up. So we've discussed a lot of the non-conforming issues and the safety issues, and we'll have to get back and get some specificity, if I can say that right. We've dealt with
Something
location.
else out on this whole aesthetic business. Some cities, I know you've seen it, Kevin, will use a series of examples of the kinds of fences that would be appropriate, like in the front yard. Might consider that too.
Right, you know, in some places they'll have a whole, like if you've got a historic district, or if you got some place that's not protected by covenants or bills of assurance, you can adopt a pattern book. You know, just hire either an architect or a landscape architect to come up with a very good, well vetted pattern book of, you know, maybe 1 or 2 pages, hopefully just 1 page, where you've got different frames and the stuff you like and the stuff you don't. It's fairly simple to do.
Andy?
I'm just going over my notes here. One of the things we somehow missed talking about, and maybe that was intentional, is the idea of whether we wanted the finished side of the fence facing a public way.
We haven't quite gotten there. We're about there, Andy.
Okay.
we are about there.
Yeah.
So, you know, fence location, drainage, access, site distance requirements. Again, this 141014 is a new item that we've already talked about just a moment ago. Design standards, we've just dealt with height. This will get modified, obviously, based on some of our discussion. But I thought the graphic was a little bit more helpful than the hand-drawn one I had inserted in my previous examples. One thing that I added in just from our discussion was these 2 items, C and D. D was based on some of the discussion we just had on right-of-way. So do we want a section D that deals specifically with front yards and right-of-way, or do we even want to distinguish how far they have to be from the right-of-way from a yard? You know, whether it's a side yard or a front yard, distance from right-of-way. Do we want to keep them 5 feet from a right-of-way right here, right now, and call it a day?
And this is only dealing with the short ones that are in front of the building line, right?
Correct. So distance from right of way, we can contextualize this if we'd like.
Well, that's when you wrote. That's when you wrote that.
This is I'm just lost here now. Oh, this has to do with your drawing. Okay.
Right. So
me.
we're
This-
that right.
Yeah,
we're
this is introducing the idea from Bentonville. We felt like one problem with that when we were discussing it in the PRC was like those lots that back up to Bear Paw, not allowing people to go ahead and take it all the way to their rear property line. When their rear property line, you know, is adjacent to a street.
So do we want to address right of way specifically here?
I mean, we had the discussion of the front yard fences being 5 foot off the right of way, and that's when you wrote that. But in the case of like Bear Paw, I'm in agreement with Andy, is the people ought to be able to put them on their rear property line when the rear property line is adjacent to a right of way line.
Yeah, I think we're going to be able to address the distance from the right of way, the 5 foot rule, in the same discussion as the fences in front yard topic. Otherwise, they're gonna be located on the property lines on side yards and rear yards, or up to the property line on side yards and rear yards, just using the building setback terminology.
Okay.
Okay. So make sure we address that.
I'm gonna interject something here that's come up that we never even talked about it, but we're following a principle in the city of Sherwood that particularly on some of the applicants that have rural property on Hatcher or maybe on Oakdale, or really anybody could do it, I guess, but those people that have, you know, more estate size lots, they want to put a gate on their property line. And our position is here is a gate does not a fence make.
You want to institutionalize that?
Well, I don't know if we even need to. I don't know if we're just not okay just saying, yeah, you can put a gate, but you can't bring your fence up to it. You know, all the fence rules apply to everything but the gate, you know, but people don't want people even pulling, you know, into their property. So we talked about having some language that allowed a certain setback from the right of way. So if somebody pulled into somebody's driveway and there was, you know, and then another car maybe pulled halfway into their driveway and the other half is sticking out on Oakdale, that they're not impeding traffic while they figured out they pulled into the wrong address. But I don't want to interrupt Kevin's flow more than I already have, but it's something that we haven't, you know, we need to probably talk about a little bit further.
Well, my flow is just fine, Mr. Wilson. And in fact, you just referred to the public way and this idea that, you know, installation and finished surface and standard trade practice, these were all terms that we had been using because of issues that you have faced, Andy, out there, where you have the non-finished surface facing outward toward a public way or a public street, and it becomes, we're getting into aesthetics. So how does the city want, from a policy standpoint, want to deal with that? Do we want to use public way, public right-of-way, street, trail, staff determinate permit, permit supplement? That's all part of the discussion.
I think generally, I do want to say generally, the city, I guess the planning commission, it may just, you know, be inappropriate for them to, you know, any of these discussions about what a fence looks like, the aesthetics are inappropriate. Or they could decide they're going to run that on up and let the city council decide. You know, I think they are appropriate. A lot of the other cities are doing it. Bentonville required, you know, yeah, I don't know. This whole question kind of needs to be answered before we can move very far into these topics.
And I think we need to have a good rationale for it before it goes to the council. I don't want to say something, well, I don't know, what do you think? I don't want to do that to the council.
Yeah.
I mean, in your Bear Paw example, there's lots of fences, I mean, all along Bear Paw from 107 all the way up to the high school. Some of them are in, some of them are out. I think we ought to make it where the picket side is out when it faces a public right of way. I mean, and that would apply to somebody that's got a normal size on the front too, to put the picket towards the street on the front. I mean, because that is the
right, and that's exactly what
side.
we would like to say. What's the consensus of the planning commissioners, other planning commissioners, on that idea?
Well, I think it ought to be on the outside on that Bear Paw example. You know, people ought to just do right by their neighbors, but there's a limit to how far you can push that. But on the right of way, yeah, I think we should.
Absolutely.
I agree.
So we just have to figure out how to word it. We can work on that and bring it back to the planning commission, how to accomplish that. You know, we discussed it some today. It's difficult to word. You could say things like when on the property line, you know, adjacent to a right of way, and then people set it 6 inches off the property line and say, oh, well, mine's not on the property line. So there's just, but we just have to, you know, say what we mean and then enforce what we meant to say. It's about as good as it gets sometimes.
I've gone ahead and noted that, and we, you know, the standard trade practice, again, this is language that I put in here. Andy, thank you. American Fence Association, other like trade or industry. So at inspection, Andy can go to a standard and have an open and honest discussion with an applicant or a property owner.
Yeah, and the idea there is to prevent, y'all have all seen the incomplete fence at Miller Road and Hickory Oak Drive. Or is that, yeah, Oak Heights Drive. I'm assuming. Y'all have all seen that. It's been there for several years.
I have. It's posts and the two before rails, and that's all
Right.
they got to. I mean,
You know,
we didn't even get all of them up.
And having something like this would allow us to go into that situation with code enforcement and say, look, you've got to either tear down what you started here or complete your job, because what you've done here is not according to any standard industry trade practice. Right now, they could say, well, that's a fence. It meets your definition of a fence, and they would be right. So that's why we're wanting to add some language like this.
All right. I think that's about it, everyone. Again, we're going back to this. We've looked at this before. We're dealing with trying, because it contextually makes sense to have a definition for site triangle and your height of obstruction. I've got some notes from our prior discussion, but we've got a site triangle that utilizes a 25-foot threshold. The wording here was lifted. It's actually been wordsmithed a bit. The height of obstructions, again, it's separate, but very much related to that encroachment issue at corners. We revised it to between 2 and 10 feet based on tonight's discussion, and the 25-foot is pretty standard, especially for local roads. So I didn't know if everyone was okay with that 25-foot site triangle.
That's pretty standard. And gentlemen, we need to move along because we still have a Board of Adjustment meeting.
Yes, we do.
So that's what we have.
As we wrap this up, I just want to thank everybody for their work on this, and I want to personally give my congratulations to Rob for the honor bestowed on him as Man of the Year. It was well deserved and hard earned. Thank you.
And that's it, Mr. Middleton. We've got some definitions here, which I'll get with staff, and then obviously our new city planner will want to be involved with this for sure. So we'll keep the conversation going in this regard.
Okay. That finishes that. I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All roll.
Bruno,
Aye.
Gillum,
Yeah.
Martin,
Aye.
Middleton.
Aye. Okay, calling the Board of Adjustment meeting to order, May 12th. Please call the roll.
Bruno,
Here.
Gillum,
Here.
Martin,
Here.
Knight, Middleton.
Here. You all received a copy of the minutes of the January meeting. Are there any corrections or additions to those minutes?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll.
Can I just note my own mistake on the approval of January 14th? I have 2019, but I have amended that to 2020. I'm shocked nobody brought that up. Okay. Bruno? Are we muted?
You gonna vote?
I didn't hear.
Oh, I thought you guys already voted. I was doing the roll call.
Go ahead.
Is there a motion?
Yes. There was a motion and a second.
By whom? I'm sorry, I missed it.
With Bruno and Martin.
I was the second. I was the second.
Okay. Bruno?
Aye.
Gillum?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
Middleton?
Aye. Is there anything else to be added to the agenda other than what's on there right now? Then the agenda is set. Number 5, please.
A variance request of 10 feet into the required 25-foot front yard setback on lots 12 through 19 of Stonehill 7. Thomas Engineering Agent.
Mr. Gamble?
Yes, sir. You should all have received a report, Board of Zoning Adjustment report from staff. Right now, we're dealing with the final plat for Stonehill Addition Phase 7. This is Block 18, specifically lots 12 through 19 as shown on the preliminary. The applicants have come ahead with a final plat, but for the lots in question, lots 12 through 19, they would like to have a front setback variance. Sometimes you refer to these, or I refer to these as blanket variance, because there are, these lots are relatively small. I won't read directly from the report, but basically they want to have a building to property line setback along the front of 15 feet in lieu of the required 25 for these lots. Your PRC discussion is there for you to review. Here's the subject property in relation to some of the surrounding roadways. Basically, as you come up Feldspar Drive and it tees up with Rock Ridge, it continues through, and that's a portion of where one would access this development. Here's a graphic that shows the lots in question in relation to the preliminary plat, which has been superimposed on a GIS map with the existing development around it. This has to do with these lots right here. This is the applicant's submittal drawn back in February. This is their boundary survey, and I've gone ahead and annotated Little Ridge Court down, and these are the lots in question. You can see how, because of topography in the creek, how the shape of these lots as shown and platted preliminarily from a building envelope standpoint gets a bit constrained. And then of course, here's your a tighter graphic. The box with 25-foot building to property line setback is shown with an arrow. It's a little offset a little bit, it's hard to tell, but then they have the proposed, because the lots that are platted here, this is where you have an existing 25-foot, so kind of where my hand is, that's where that existing 25-foot would be. But then you see the 15-foot line that they show as proposed. So you can see where that is for these lots.
If I'm not mistaken, didn't the final plat come in with a 25-foot setback?
I don't think the final plat did. I have not seen a final plat utilizing a 25-foot. But of course,
I believe it did come in with the 25. That was this is one that we had approved a month or so ago. It might have been 2 months ago, but anyway, it was this year that we approved it, and we did have that conversation, but we thought it was better to go ahead and stay with the 25 feet on the plat and then request the variance as a matter of procedure to do it that way. That way we're keeping it as approved plat, as an approved final plat, which it is, an approved final plat. And those lots are available for sale. That it meets all the requirements. So now the question is how you will consider amending that requirement with a variance to allow the 15.
Have we received any written statement other than the letter from Thomas Engineering?
No, no public comments.
Is there anybody who wishes to speak to that in the public? Is the applicant here?
I'm here as the applicant, Thomas Pownell with Thomas Engineering. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Good.
Before you make a statement, I have to swear you in, and any statement you make, do you swear it will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth as you understand?
I do.
See,
Okay.
what you have to convince this board of is that there is an undue hardship as a result of the imposition of the standards because of the unique characteristics of a property.
So first of all, just to comment on the plat is filed with a 25 foot. I confirmed that just a few minutes ago. So just so y'all know. So as far as the unique circumstances, it's easily addressed. It's topography. It's a steep slope down into a creek. Moving the buildings forward in towards the street allows a great deal easier building site. And that's as simple as I could put it, really. And then another thing to keep in mind too is there is no houses across the street, so we'll be 15 feet away, but there are no homes across the street that say, well, why aren't we 15, or why are they closer to us? So that's one thing to keep in mind too. That's our stance. And then I think that's it. Open it up for any questions maybe.
Commissioners, do you have questions? Well, I'll start. Do these lots, can you build a structure on these lots and meet all of the zoning requirements?
Yes.
Is there anything that justifies 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lots being unique?
That justifies them being unique.
Correct.
Other than the stated topography and the creek in the back, that's the uniqueness.
Well, I will suggest that I've been out there, and the topography is not nearly as bad as other lots that have been developed nicely.
Okay, that's fine.
Discussion, commissioners. You've seen the recommendation. I guess I will just jump right in. In my mind, asking for 9 of them by definition does not make it unique.
No.
And secondly, that I don't know what the undue hardship is because nobody has tried to build anything on any of these lots. And no request, nothing has been given to us. What's that?
That's movement in my house.
We have not presented with a case proving or demonstrating an undue hardship. And the fact is, they could be built on. And the topography doesn't limit the choices so dramatically that it creates an undue hardship.
Exactly.
That's my take on it.
I totally agree.
That's fine. Sounds like one of your well, one of your worries is that it's I think Mr. Gamble used blanket variance, I guess. So I have a point of question towards probably Mr. Cobb and you, Mr. Middleton. In pursuing this right now, and then we take it to a vote, and then let's assume for a moment we receive a negative vote or no second, somewhere along those lines. But then we come back with an individual application for lot 19. Is that enough of a change to where that stands on its own and we don't have to wait the required time period of 6 months, 2 years, or whatever it may be? I'd like a clarification on that.
I think it could stand on its own merits as long as it's considered a separate case. And it would have to stand on its own merits. It had to also approve an undue hardship.
Right. I just want to.
It would be the same standards. It would be the same standards, but it would probably be viewed as a new request.
That's what I want clarification on. Is not whether the standards are different, but if we fail today, but then we come back at a later time with just one single lot with a house plan saying, hey, we want to build this house, it doesn't fit. We'd like to
I would doubt though that you're going to have the history that this already has been considered for that reason.
All right, yeah.
Do you think it might be more prudent just to withdraw and come back individually?
I'm working through it right now. That's why I'm kind of asking these questions, just to make sure. I want to know how it goes. The only thing I worry about, why we'd like to do it for these 6 lots, whatever they are, is then it gets all 6 of them. And then that way, if we come back, we'll say lot 16 and then maybe lot 13. Well, they get 15 footers. And then for some reason, maybe 14 doesn't get one. Then you don't have a consistency. You have houses kind of jumping around as far as your setback. I think that's why we'd like to do all of them at once.
That's why the statutory and ordinance language reads unique and undue hardship. Okay. Each one of them has to stand on their own. Okay. And it doesn't matter about consistency, it's uniqueness and undue hardship.
Okay. Okay. Any other comments from the commissioners? I'd like you to hold your vote for 1 second.
I mean, if anybody's been there, this is kind of an interesting location. Of you're surrounded by Gap Creek on both sides, and I mean, you don't have a lot across the street for topography reasons, but 17 without lot 17 right there is going to be very difficult to be buildable. Thomas might have a different opinion than I do. Lot 17 right there is going to be very difficult to be buildable without a variance, in my opinion. That's speaking as an engineer and a home builder myself. 17 would not be very desirable to build on. As far as few of the others are concerned, being 105 feet deep. Yeah.
Mr. Martin's correct. 17 poses a challenge, but you know, if you ask me the question, can we build it to code? Yeah, we can. You can do 2 stories. You can build to code. You can make it work. But it's just a challenge.
May I add that I think what you just said, Thomas, clarifies or it undergirds our comments and discussions we had some time ago, which was why do you know, is it better to go ahead and combine 15 with 16, 16 with 17, 17 with 18, or take one of them out and split the difference between the others to make them more buildable? And we did raise that question, and then the plat came in as submitted because it is possible to do. So with that possibility, even though it may be very difficult, it's still possible. So the developer chose to submit this way.
Yeah, that's fine. We're not arguing it's possible, and that's why we did it. We wanted to go ahead and move forward. Okay. Well, in light of this discussion, I think we'd like to withdraw without prejudice. That's okay.
Mr. Cobb, what's the procedure on, do we have to vote on allowing him to withdraw?
No, I think he can do that. He's at the meeting and he's made a determination that he wishes to withdraw the petition. So I think so long as the record reflects that that's what occurred, then he hasn't lost his opportunity to come back if he wants to with any kind of time limit.
Okay. So it's withdrawn.
Thank you. Yes, that's my request, and thank you. I appreciate y'all's time.
Is there any further business for the board? I'll take a motion.
Second?
Second.
Bruno,
Bruno?
Say aye.
Gillum,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Middleton.
Aye. Well, folks, thank you all. This has been a real unusual experience, but I think we did some good work here. I hope we can get back together in person again soon, but if we can't, we'll do this again. Okay.
Bruno, Blake, y'all be careful going home.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Long commute. See y'all.
See y'all later.
Thank you all.